Captain Jake Miller stood at the viewing port of the New Horizon and watched the massive space station grow larger as his ship approached. Kepler Station was unlike anything humanity had ever built. The structure stretched for miles in every direction, made of materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Crystalline towers twisted upward like frozen lightning, while organic-looking sections pulsed with soft colors that reminded Jake of a heartbeat. First time seeing? It never gets old, said Ambassador Lisa Park as she joined him at the window. She had been to the station 3 times during the preliminary negotiations. Jake could see the wonder still bright in her eyes. Hard to believe we're actually going to be part of all this, Jake replied. 3 years of careful talks and cultural exchanges had led to this moment. Today, humanity would formally join the Galactic Confederation. Earth would no longer be alone in the universe. The docking process took an hour. Kepler Station was so large that it had its own gravitational field created by technology that human scientists were still trying to understand. As the New Horizon settled into its assigned berth, Jake could see dozens of other ships in the docking bays. None of them looked anything like human vessels. There were ships that looked like they were grown from crystal, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Other vessels appeared to be made of living wood with bark-like hulls and what might have been leaves growing from their outer surfaces. Some ships seemed to be made of nothing but contained energy, glowing spheres that somehow held their shape in the vacuum of space. The welcoming committee is waiting, Lisa said, checking her tablet. Representatives from 12 different species. This is the biggest diplomatic event the Confederation has held in over 50 years. Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. As the senior military officer on the mission, he would be formally presenting humanity's defensive capabilities to the Confederation's military leaders. It was supposed to be a routine briefing, part of the integration process that every new member went through. The airlock cycled open. Jake got his first close look at the beings who would be humanity's new neighbors. The Zephyrians were the most numerous, tall, crystalline beings whose bodies seemed to be made of living glass. They moved with a musical quality, their footsteps creating soft, chiming sounds. The ethereals were harder to see clearly, beings of contained gas and energy that shimmered like heat waves. Sylvans looked like walking trees, their bark-like skin covered in patterns of leaves that changed color as they moved. Kepler Station, said the lead Zephyrian in perfect English. The translation device implanted behind Jake's ear converted the musical tones into words he could understand. I am Crystal's Song of Morning, military commander of the Confederation Defense Force. We have waited long to meet the people of Earth. Jake shook the being's hand, surprised by how warm the crystal felt. Thank you for having us, Captain. Jake Miller, and this is Ambassador Lisa Park. We're honored to be here. The group made their way through corridors that seemed to change as they walked. The walls showed scenes from different worlds, images that shifted and flowed like living paintings. Jake saw vast crystal cities under purple skies, forests where the trees reached into space, and oceans of liquid methane where strange creatures swam through glowing currents. Your species fascinates us, said one of the ethereals, its voice like wind through leaves. The preliminary reports describe humans as remarkably adaptable, come from what we would consider a hostile environment, yet you have thrived. Earth can be challenging, Lisa agreed. But we've learned to work with what we have. They entered a massive ceremonial hall where hundreds of beings from dozens of species had gathered. The diversity was overwhelming. Jake saw creatures that looked like living gemstones, beings that appeared to be made of flowing water, and entities whose forms seemed to shift and change as he watched them. But as Jake looked around, he began to notice something odd. Despite their incredible variety, all of these species shared certain characteristics. They moved gracefully, but carefully, as if they were afraid of causing harm. Their voices were soft, their gestures gentle, even the largest beings towering. Creatures that looked like they were made of living stone spoke in whispers and moved with delicate precision. The ceremony began with presentations from different species, each sharing something about their culture and history. The Sylvans offered seeds from their homeworld that would grow into trees that could survive in almost any environment. The ethereals shared energy patterns that could power entire cities without creating any waste. The crystal beings, the Zephyrians, presented art forms that existed in dimensions human eyes couldn't perceive. When it came time for the human presentation, Lisa stood and activated a holographic display showing Earth. "We bring the gift of perseverance," she said. "Our world has tested us with ice ages and meteor strikes, with predators and plagues and natural disasters. We have learned that sometimes the only way forward is to fight for every step." Jake watched the faces of the alien delegates as Lisa spoke. He saw something in their expressions that he couldn't quite identify. Might have been admiration, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like fear. After the ceremony, there was a reception where the different species could mingle and learn about each other. Jake found himself in conversation with Crystal Song of Morning and several other military leaders. He was surprised to learn that most of their military forces were actually rescue and evacuation specialists. "You must understand," explained a Sylvan commander whose bark was scarred with age. "The galaxy has been peaceful for many thousands of years. Our conflicts are rare and usually resolved through negotiation. Our ships are designed to save lives, not take them." "That sounds ideal," Jake said. "But what do you do if negotiation doesn't work? What if someone doesn't want to talk?" The alien commanders exchanged glances that Jake couldn't interpret. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The soft, musical tones that had been playing in the background cut off, replaced by harsh warning sounds that made Jake's teeth ache. Emergency broadcasts began playing. On every surface that could display images, Jake saw Crystal's Song of Morning's form flicker with colors he hadn't seen before. Rapid flashes of deep red and black that somehow conveyed panic even though Jake didn't understand the meaning. "What's happening?" Lisa asked, pushing through the crowd to reach them. Crystal Song's voice had lost all its musical quality. Now it sounded like breaking glass. "They have returned. After 200 years they have returned." "Who has returned?" Jake demanded. Instead of answering, Crystal Song activated a holographic display that showed star charts and ship positions. Jake could see Confederation vessels all over the galaxy beginning to move. But they weren't moving toward whatever threat had appeared. They were moving away from it. "The Devourers have come back," whispered the Sylvan commander. "We must evacuate immediately. All civilians must be moved to the deep core systems." Jake stared at the display, trying to understand what he was seeing. "You're evacuating? What about fighting them? What about defending your territory?" The silence that followed his questions was complete. Every alien in the area turned to look at him with expressions of shock and horror. "Fight." Crystal Song repeated the word like Jake had suggested something obscene. "You cannot fight the Devourers. They are the apex of evolution. They are perfect predators. The only response is to run and hope they take what they want quickly." "This is your space," Jake protested. "These are your worlds, your people. You can't just abandon them. We have done so for thousands of years," the Sylvan said sadly. "It is the way of things. The Devourers harvest, and we rebuild elsewhere. It is the price of existence in this galaxy." Jake looked around at the beings who had seemed so advanced, so wise, so powerful just moments before. They were moving with desperate urgency, their graceful movements replaced by something that looked very much like panic. Ships were already launching from the docking bays, fleeing toward the center of the galaxy. "Show me," Jake said quietly. "Show me what these Devourers look like." Crystal Song hesitated, then activated another display. Jake found himself looking at footage from a distant world, images captured by fleeing reconnaissance drones. He saw ships that looked like they had been grown rather than built, organic vessels covered in what might have been scales or armor plates. As he watched, these ships descended toward a peaceful-looking world covered in blue oceans and green continents. The ships began to change as they entered the atmosphere, extending what looked like feeding tubes and harvesting arms. Jake realized with growing horror that he was watching the methodical consumption of an entire world. "This is Haven's Rest," Crystal Song explained. A world of the gentle ones. They are artists and philosophers, beings who have never known violence. The devourers will process everything on the surface. The people, the animals, the plants, all of it will become food. Dr. Amy Rodriguez crouched behind the ruins of what had once been a beautiful temple, her hands shaking as she tried to adjust her emergency transmitter. 3 days ago, Haven's Rest had been paradise. The gentle ones had built their cities too. Blend with nature, creating structures that looked like they had grown from the ground rather than being constructed. Now those same cities were being torn apart by creatures that made her worst. Nightmares seemed tame. She pressed her eye to a crack in the broken wall and watched one of the devourers working at a harvesting station they had set up in the temple courtyard. The creature was 12 feet tall and covered in dark chitinous armor that seemed to shift and move like living shadow. It had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could slice through stone, and a face that Amy tried not to look at directly. The thing that disturbed her most was how efficiently it worked. There was no rage or cruelty in its movements, just the methodical precision of a farmer collecting crops. The harvesting station itself was a nightmare of organic technology. Tubes and processing chambers pulsed with their own heartbeat as they converted everything fed into them. Amy had watched in horror as the machine processed everything from furniture to flowering plants to the gentle ones themselves. Everything became the same gray nutrient paste that the devourers consumed. A soft sound behind her made Amy turn. 3 of the gentle ones huddled in the deeper shadows of the ruined temple. They were beautiful beings, tall and slender with fur that changed color based on their emotions. Right now, all 3 were a deep blue-black that Amy had learned meant terror and despair. Soft voice of learning, Amy whispered to the eldest of the 3. The gentle ones had names that were more like poetry than the simple words humans used. We need to move. They will search this area soon. Soft voice of learning looked at her with large eyes that held no understanding. Move where, friend Amy? The sky hunters are everywhere. The ground feeders consume all they touch. There is nowhere to run that they will not find us. Amy felt frustration building in her chest. She had been trying to organize the survivors for 3 days, but the gentle ones seemed incapable of thinking in terms of resistance or fight. Their entire culture was built around harmony and peaceful coexistence. They literally could not understand the concept of fighting back. Listen to me, Amy said, keeping her voice low but urgent. I know this is hard to understand, but we cannot just hide and wait. We have to do something. What is there to do? Asked another of the gentle ones, a younger one, whose name translated to something like Dawn Singer of Hope. Harvest acres are perfect beings. They are the end of all things that live. To resist them is like trying to resist the turning of the seasons or the movement of the stars. Amy closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had been a xenobiologist before the devourers came, studying the peaceful culture of the gentle ones for her research. Now she found herself trying to teach beings who had never known violence how to commit it. In my world, she said carefully, we have a saying, when something tries to eat you, you bite back. The 3 gentle ones looked at her with expressions of complete bewilderment. The concept was so foreign to them that they could not process it. Violence was not just forbidden in their society, it was literally unthinkable. Amy's transmitter finally activated. She heard the blessed sound of a human voice through the static. This is Kepler Station calling any human signals. Please respond. This is Dr. Amy Rodriguez on Haven's Rest, she whispered into the device. I am alive and hiding with survivors. The situation here is worse than anyone imagined. There was a pause, then a different voice came through the speaker. Amy recognized Captain Miller from the briefings before she had left for her research mission. Dr. Rodriguez, this is Captain Miller aboard the New Horizon. What is your current status? Amy looked out at the devastation visible through the temple ruins. In the distance, she could see the devourer ships landed like enormous parasites on the planet's surface. Harvesting machines moved between them in endless lines, processing everything they encountered. The gentle ones are being systematically harvested, she reported. The devourers are not just taking resources. They are processing all organic matter on the planet, including the people. I estimate they have already consumed 60% of the population. Are you in immediate danger? Amy watched as a devourer. Patrol moved past the temple, their clawed feet leaving deep gouges in the stone pathway. Everything on this planet is in immediate danger, Captain. The Confederation ships evacuated 3 days ago. They left everyone behind. She heard voices in the background on the other end of the transmission, heated discussion that she could not make out clearly. Finally, Captain Miller's voice returned. Dr. Rodriguez, we are coming to get you. Can you hold position for 18 hours? Amy almost laughed. Captain, with respect, there is no position to hold. This is not a military situation.
Oh.
This is an extermination. The Gentle Ones do not even have a word for weapon in their language. They cannot fight. They can only hide and die. Then we will teach them to fight. The simple confidence in Miller's voice sent a chill through Amy. She realized that the captain was not just talking about a rescue mission. He was talking about war. Captain, you do not understand what you are facing here. I have observed the Devourers for 3 days. They are perfect killing machines. Every aspect of their biology is designed for hunting and consuming other life forms. They have armor that deflects energy weapons, claws that can cut through any material, and they are fast beyond belief. The Confederation calls them apex predators for a reason. Doctor, said a new voice on the transmission, this is Colonel Pete Barnes. I need you to tell me about their tactics. How do they hunt? How do they organize their attacks? Amy thought about what she had observed. They work alone mostly, but they coordinate through some kind of chemical signals. Each one seems to have a territory that it clears systematically. They are thorough, but not particularly creative. They follow patterns. Patterns can be predicted, Barnes said. Predicted means vulnerable. Before Amy could respond, she heard a sound that froze her blood. It was a hunting call, a deep thrumming. Noise that the Devourers made when they detected prey. The 3 Gentle Ones beside her turned an even darker shade of blue and began to tremble. They know we are here, whispered soft voice of learning. The end of songs comes for us now. Amy looked around the ruined temple for escape routes. There was a passage that led deeper into the building, but she did not know where it went. There was also a window opening that faced the courtyard where the harvesting station worked. Dr. K. Miller's voice through the transmitter. What is happening? They have found us, Amy said. She made a decision that would have been impossible for the Gentle Ones to understand. Instead of running deeper into the temple, she moved toward the window opening. I am going to try something. She had noticed that the harvesting station had several weak points where organic tubes connected to processing chambers. The machine was efficient, but it was also dependent on those connections. If they were damaged, the entire station might stop working. Amy found a piece of broken stone that fit well in her hand. It was sharp on one edge and heavy enough to do damage. The Gentle Ones watched in amazement as she prepared to attack the harvesting machine. Friend Amy, soft voice of learning, said urgently, you cannot harm the harvest acres' feeding tools. It is not possible. They are perfect. Watch me, Amy said. She waited until the devourer operating the machine turned away, then threw the stone as hard as she could at the largest organic tube. The stone struck true, tearing through the biological material and causing a spray of the gray nutrient paste to leak out. The effect was immediate. Alarms began sounding from the harvesting station, biological warnings that brought the devourer running back to investigate. But more importantly, the machine began to slow down and eventually stopped working altogether. Amy felt a surge of triumph. Perfect predators had imperfect tools. The devourer, examining the damaged machine, let out a roar of frustration that echoed through the ruins. It began searching the area with new urgency, knowing that something had deliberately sabotaged its work. This way, Amy whispered to the Gentle Ones, leading them toward the passage that went deeper into the temple. We need to move now. As they fled through the ancient corridors, Amy kept talking into her transmitter. Captain Miller, I need you to understand something. The Devourers can be hurt. Their machines can be broken. They are not as perfect as everyone believes. Explain, came the immediate response. They have never faced organized resistance, Amy said as they ran. Their tactics are designed for hunting prey that runs or hides. They do not know how to respond to attacks on their equipment or coordinated strikes against their operations. The passage led to an underground chamber where they found more survivors. nearly 30 gentle ones who had been hiding since the harvest began. They looked up at Amy with expressions of hope and confusion. "Friend Amy," said one of them, "you have done something that cannot be done. You have struck against the perfect ones and lived." Amy looked around at the frightened faces surrounding her. The New Horizon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Haven's rest system. Captain Jake Miller immediately understood why the galaxy feared the Devourers. Through the view screen, he could see dozens of organic ships surrounding the planet-like parasites feeding on a host. Each vessel was the size of a small city, their surfaces writhing with movement as they processed the harvested material from the world below. "My God," whispered Ambassador Lisa Park, standing beside Jake on the bridge. "The planet's atmosphere is changing color." Jake could see it too. Haven's Rest had been a blue and green world when Dr. Rodriguez first arrived there. Now large sections of the surface were turning gray-brown as the Devourers stripped away all organic matter. The beautiful world was being consumed before their eyes. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Susan Lee from the communications station, "I have Dr. Rodriguez on the emergency frequency. She is requesting immediate contact." Jake activated the comm system. "Dr. Rodriguez, this is Captain Miller. What is your current status?" Amy's voice came through, filled with static, but clear enough to understand. "Captain, I have 43 survivors with me in an underground facility. We have been conducting sabotage operations against Devourer harvesting stations for the past 12 hours. Need you to know that these creatures can be hurt." Jake exchanged glances with Colonel Pete Barnes, who had moved to stand at the tactical station. "Explain, Doctor." "The Devourers are apex predators, but they have never faced organized resistance. Their equipment is biological, which means it can be damaged or destroyed. More importantly, they do not work well together when under attack. Each one operates individually." "What kind of sabotage operations?" Barnes asked. "We have been using primitive weapons to attack their harvesting machines. Rocks, pieces of metal, anything we can find. The gentle ones are learning to strike back, but it is difficult for them. Their entire culture is built around nonviolence." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the Devourer ships.
"Oh.
There were 37 of the massive vessels in orbit, with hundreds of smaller craft moving between the surface and the fleet. By any normal military calculation, a single human ship against such numbers would be suicide. But Jake had spent his entire career learning that normal calculations did not always apply to humans. "Doctor, we are going to begin rescue operations. Can you guide survivors to designated pickup points?" Captain Amy's voice carried a note of urgency. "You need to understand what you are facing. The Devourers are not just large and strong. They are intelligent, and they learn quickly. They have already begun adapting to our sabotage efforts by posting guards around their equipment, and we adapt faster," said Colonel Barnes. "Doctor, I need you to mark targets for us. Show us which installations are most important to their operations." Jake turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Walker. "Prepare all weapons systems. We are going in." "Sir," Walker replied, his voice uncertain. "Should I signal the fleet to prepare for combat operations?" Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had signed up for exploration and diplomatic missions, not warfare against creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. But he could see in their faces the same determination that had carried humanity from caves to the stars. "There is no fleet, Lieutenant. There is just us." The New Horizon began its approach to Haven's Rest, and Jake watched the sensor readings. As the Devourer ships became aware of their presence, the alien vessels began to move, positioning themselves to intercept the human ship. Jake had expected this, but what surprised him was how they moved. Each ship acted independently, without coordination or apparent communication with the others. "They're not working together," observed Navigator Chris Hayes. "Each vessel is trying to intercept us individually." Dr. Rodriguez was right, Barnes said. "They are pack hunters, but they hunt as individuals, not as a coordinated group." Jake smiled grimly. Humans had learned to fight as packs 30,000 years ago. It was time to remind the galaxy why that mattered. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. We are about to engage hostile forces. Our mission is to rescue human and alien survivors on the planet below. We will accomplish this mission by doing what humans do best. We will fight as a team. The first Devourer's ship reached weapons range and opened fire. The organic weapons sent streams of acidic projectiles toward the New Horizon, but Jake had been expecting this. Human ships were built for exploration in dangerous environments, with shields and armor designed to handle everything from asteroid impacts to solar flares. Return fire, Jake ordered. The New Horizon's weapons were not designed for ship-to-ship combat, but they had been modified during the journey to Haven's Rest. Mining lasers became cutting beams. Survey charges became missiles and construction. Tools became weapons of war. The human ship struck back at its attacker with a ferocity that seemed to surprise the Devourer vessel. Direct hit on their forward section, reported Walker. They are leaking atmosphere. Jake watched as the damaged Devourer ship fell back, and he realized something important. The organic vessels were impressive to look at, but they had never been designed to fight opponents who shot back. For thousands of years, they had only needed to overpower helpless prey. Captain, said Dr. Rodriguez through the comm system, I can see your battle from here. The other Devourer ships are not moving to help the one you damaged. They are staying with their individual territories. Confirmed, said Hayes. The enemy fleet is not responding as a coordinated unit. Each ship is defending its own area. This was the advantage Jake had been hoping for. Human military doctrine was built around units supporting each other, covering weaknesses and combining strengths. The Devourers, for all their individual power, fought like animals protecting their own kills. Take us to the planet, Jake ordered. We are going to rescue our people. The New Horizon dove toward Haven's Rest, pursued by 3 Devourer ships that seemed determined to stop the rescue operation. But Jake had one more advantage that the alien predators had never encountered. Human beings would sacrifice themselves for others. Captain, said Engineer Dan Foster over the intercom, I can overload our main power core. We'll create an explosion large enough to damage any ship within 2 kilometers. Negative, Jake replied immediately. Ship, or this crew, we find another way. Sir, Foster continued, with respect, if one of those ships gets between us and the survivors, people will die. Jake looked at the tactical display. Foster was right. Devourers were positioning themselves to cut off escape routes from the planet. If the New Horizon was destroyed or forced to retreat, Dr. Rodriguez and her survivors would be trapped. But Jake had not survived 20 years in space by giving up when the odds looked bad. All stop, he ordered. Reverse course. We are going to try something these creatures have never seen before. Sir? Walker asked, confused. We are going to use their own tactics against them, Jake explained. Each Devourer ship is defending its own territory. That means they see other Devourer ships as competition, not allies. Jake maneuvered the New Horizon between 2 of the pursuing vessels, then fired at both of them simultaneously. The damaged ships turned on each other, each assuming the other had attacked first. Within minutes, 2 apex predators were locked in combat with each other, while the human ship slipped past toward the planet. Brilliant, said Barnes. You turned their individual nature into a weakness. The New Horizon entered Haven's Rest's atmosphere and immediately came under attack from ground-based, overt positions. But Jake had been expecting this too. He activated the ship's emergency landing protocols, systems designed to bring the vessel down safely, even under the worst conditions. All hands, prepare for combat landing, announced. The ship touched down in a clearing near the underground facility, where Dr. Rodriguez was hiding with the survivors. Jake could see Devourer forces moving toward their position, but he was no longer worried about the odds. His crew was armed and ready, and they were about to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. Ground teams, prepare for deployment, Colonel Barnes ordered. Remember, we are not just fighting for the people on this planet. We are fighting to prove that nothing in this universe is too strong to resist. Jake watched through the view screen as his people prepared to face creatures that had terrorized civilizations for millennia. Sergeant Kate Walsh was checking her weapon systems. Corporal Bill Chen was organizing supply runs to the survivors. Dr. Nick Adams was preparing medical equipment to treat wounded aliens who had never experienced battlefield medicine. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting enemies that the entire galaxy considered unbeatable. But they were human. And humans had been fighting impossible odds since the first caveman picked up a stick to defend his family. "Open the landing bay doors," Jake ordered. "Let's go teach these apex predators what it means to mess with a Deathworld species." The doors opened, and humanity took its first step onto the battlefield that would change the galaxy forever. The distance, Jake could see Devourers moving toward them with the confidence of creatures that had never known defeat. They were about to learn something new. Sergeant Kate Walsh hit the ground running as the New Horizons landing bay doors opened. The air on Haven's Rest smelled wrong, thick with the chemical scent of the Devourer processing machines and the smoke from burning cities. She could see 3 of the creatures moving toward their position, each one 12 feet tall and covered in armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "Contact 300 meters," she called into her radio, moving to intercept. Behind her, Corporal Bill Chen led a team of 6 Marines toward the underground facility where Dr. Rodriguez was hiding with the survivors. Kate's job was to buy them time by engaging the Devourers directly. It was the kind of mission that would have been considered suicide by any sane military planner. But Kate had grown up on Mars, where every day was a fight against an environment that wanted to kill her. She had learned early that the difference between predator and prey was not size or strength, it was attitude. The first Devourer reached her position and reared up to its full height, letting out a roar that was meant to paralyze its prey with fear. Kate responded by emptying her entire magazine into its center mass. The creature's armor absorbed most of the impacts, but several rounds found weak spots between the plates. The Devourer stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt. "They can be wounded," Kate reported over the radio.
"Our armor has gaps at the joints."
The creature recovered quickly and charged at her with claws extended. Kate dove to the side, rolled behind a piece of rubble, and reloaded her weapon. The Devourer slammed into the stone barrier with enough force to crack it. But Kate was already moving to a new position. This was the advantage that thousands of years of evolution on a death world had given humanity. They could think while fighting, adapt while under pressure, and coordinate with their pack members, even in the middle of combat. "Walsh, this is Chen," came the voice over her radio. "I have reached the survivors. Dr. Rodriguez is briefing me on their sabotage operations. These people have been fighting back for days." Kate fired another burst at the Devourer, pursuing her, aiming for the gap she had found in its armor. This time her shot struck home and the creature let out a sound of pain and rage. It was the first time in centuries that a Devourer had been seriously wounded by its intended prey. "All units, this is Captain Miller," came the voice from the ship. "Long-range sensors show reinforcements approaching. We have Devourer ships incoming from 3 directions." Kate looked up and could see the organic vessels descending through the atmosphere like massive parasites. But she also saw something else that made her smile grimly. Human ships were appearing at the edge of the star system, civilian vessels that had been converted for war during their journey to Haven's Rest. "Looks like the cavalry is coming," she said into her radio. The Devourer she had been fighting was joined by 2 others, and Kate found herself facing 3 of the apex predators. Simultaneously, by all logic, she should have been dead in seconds. Instead, she activated the emergency beacon that would call in close air support from the New Horizon. The ship's mining lasers, modified for combat, struck the ground around the 3 with pinpoint accuracy. The creatures scattered, their pack mentality breaking down under coordinated fire. Kate used their confusion to advance, moving from cover to cover while maintaining constant pressure on her enemies. "This is Dr. Rodriguez," came a new voice over the radio. "Kate, I need you to listen to me. The Devourers are not used to prey that fights back in groups. Their entire hunting strategy is built around isolating and overwhelming individual targets." Kate threw a grenade at the nearest Devourer and watched it explode against the creature's armor. The blast did not penetrate, but it sent the predator stumbling backward into one of its companions. The 2 creatures briefly turned on each other before realizing their mistake. "I can see that, Doc," Kate replied, firing at both creatures while they were distracted. They do not work well together. Above them, the space battle had begun in earnest. The human reinforcement fleet had arrived under the command of Admiral Ben Carter aboard the converted cargo hauler Defiance. The ship had been carrying mining equipment when the call for help went out. Now it carried weapons cobbled together from industrial tools and the determination of a species that refused to back down. All human vessels, this is Admiral Carter, came the announcement over all frequencies. "We are here to show these creatures what happens when they threaten our people. Every ship will do their duty." Kate watched as civilian vessels that had never been designed for combat engaged the massive Devourer fleet. A converted passenger liner used its emergency thrusters to ram a Devourer ship, sacrificing itself to disable the larger vessel. A mining barge used its ore processing lasers to cut through the organic armor of an enemy cruiser. Even a research vessel joined the fight, using its deep space sensors to coordinate attacks for the other human ships. It was chaos, but it was human chaos. Every ship supported the others, covering retreats and combining fire on priority targets. The Devourer fleet, despite being larger and more heavily armed, could not match the coordinated assault of beings who had learned to fight as a pack. "Kate," came Dr. Rodriguez's voice, "I am sending you coordinates for a major processing facility 2 kilometers from your position. If we can destroy it, we can cripple their operations on this continent." Kate looked at her tactical display. The facility was heavily defended by at least a dozen Devourers and their organic machinery. It would take her directly into the heart of enemy territory, with no support except what she could coordinate from the fleet above. "Roger, Doc. Send me the route." As Kate began moving toward the processing facility, she was joined by other human ground teams. Marine units from the newly arrived ships had landed and were advancing on Devourer positions across the planet. But more importantly, she was joined by groups of the Gentle Ones who had learned to fight under Dr. Rodriguez's guidance. The alien survivors moved awkwardly with their improvised weapons, but they moved with purpose. They had learned something that their species had never known in its entire history. They had learned that fear could be overcome by anger, and helplessness could be defeated by action. A soft voice of learning, Kate called to one of the Gentle Ones who was carrying a piece of sharpened metal like a spear. "Can you and your people handle the outer perimeter while my Marines attack the main facility?" The alien's fur had changed from its normal blue to a deep red that Kate had learned meant determination. "We will do as friend Amy has taught us. We will bite back." The attack on the processing facility began with a coordinated bombardment from orbit. Human ships used their improvised weapons to destroy the outer defenses while ground teams advanced under cover of the barrage. The Devourers defending the facility responded exactly as Dr. Rodriguez had predicted. Each creature tried to defend its own section without coordinating with the others. Kate led her team through the gaps in their defenses. Using tactics that humans had perfected over thousands of years of warfare, they moved in small groups, covered each other's advances, and concentrated their fire on individual targets. The Devourers, despite their individual strength, could not adapt to this kind of coordinated assault. The facility itself was a nightmare of organic technology. Tubes and chambers that pulsed with alien life as they processed the harvested material from the planet. Kate planted explosive charges at key points while her team held off the defenders. When the charges detonated, the entire complex collapsed in a cascade of biological failure. "Target destroyed," Kate reported. "The processing facility is offline." Above them, the space battle was reaching its climax. Admiral Carter had managed to get close enough to the Devourer flagship to launch a boarding operation. Human Marines were fighting their way through the corridors of an alien ship, using close-quarters combat techniques that the creatures had never encountered. "This is Admiral Carter," came the announcement. "We have secured the enemy command center. The Devourer fleet is withdrawing." Kate looked up to see the massive organic ships beginning to leave orbit, abandoning their harvest for the first time in recorded galactic history. Around her, the Gentle Ones were staring at the retreating fleet in amazement. "They run," whispered soft voice of learning. "The perfect hunters run from us." "They are not perfect," Kate said, watching as human ships pursued the fleeing devourers. They're just bullies who never met anyone willing to fight back. Dr. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, filled with exhaustion and triumph. All units, this is ground control. Devourers have abandoned their ground positions. Havens. Rest is liberated. Kate looked around at the devastated landscape and the survivors who were emerging from hiding places all over the continent. The planet would take years to recover from the devourer harvest, but it would recover. More importantly, the galaxy had learned something that would change everything. The apex predators could be beaten. Perfect hunters could be made to run, and humanity had shown them how. In the distance, Kate could see more human ships arriving, bringing medical supplies and reconstruction equipment, but they were not alone. Alien vessels were arriving too, ships from species that had fled at the first sign of the devourers. 6 months after the Battle of Haven's Rest, Captain Jake Miller stood in the rebuilt council chambers of Kepler, stationed and looked out at an assembly that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year ago. Representatives from dozens of species filled the hall, but now they sat differently. Their postures were straighter, their voices stronger. Their eyes held something they had never possessed before: confidence. The Zephyrian Crystal Song of Morning approached the podium. But the musical quality of her voice had changed. Where once there had been only harmony, now there were deeper notes, sounds that spoke of strength and determination. The Galactic Confederation Defense Council will now hear the report from the Haven's Rest recovery operation, she announced. Admiral Ben Carter of the Terran Defense Force will present the findings. Admiral Carter stepped forward, wearing a uniform that bore the scars of the boarding action against the Devourer flagship. Behind him stood Dr. Amy Rodriguez, whose research had become the foundation for understanding their former oppressors. The operation was a complete success, Carter began. Haven's Rest has been fully liberated. The surviving Gentle Ones have returned to their cities, and reconstruction is ahead of schedule. More importantly, we have learned something that changes everything we thought we knew about the Devourers. He activated a holographic display that showed the biological data Dr. Rodriguez had collected during her months of study. The assembled aliens leaned forward, eager to understand the creatures that had terrorized them for millennia. The Devourers are not an ancient evil, Carter continued. They are not perfect predators. They are a species that has become dependent on easy prey. Dr. Rodriguez, please explain your findings. Amy stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced the enemy and survived. The Devourers evolved in a galaxy where nothing ever fought back. Over thousands of years, they have actually become weaker, not stronger. Their armor is impressive but brittle. Their weapons are powerful but inflexible. Most importantly, their hunting strategies are completely dependent on prey that runs rather than fights. A murmur went through the assembly as species that had fled from the Devourers for generations tried to process this information. "Are you saying," asked a Sylvan representative, his bark-like voice trembling, "that we could have resisted them all along?" Amy nodded, not easily, and not without losses. But yes, Devourers are apex predators in a galaxy that forgot how to be predators themselves. They are sharks in a pond full of minnows. But when they encountered another apex predator species, their advantages disappeared. Captain Miller joined them at the podium. The question now is not whether the galaxy can resist the Devourers. The question is whether the galaxy wants to learn how. The silence that followed was different from the fearful quiet that had once filled these chambers. This was the silence of beings who were making a choice between the safety of the past and the uncertainty of the future. The first to speak was Soft Voice of Learning, the gentle one who had learned to fight alongside the humans on Haven's Rest. His name had changed in his language to something that translated as Singer of Sharp Songs, reflecting the transformation his species had undergone. "My people have seen what it means to stand and fight," he said. "We have learned that fear can be conquered by action. We vote to join this new defense force." One by one, other species began to stand and declare their intention to learn what humans could teach them. The Zephyrians, whose crystal bodies could be shaped into armor. The Ethereals, whose energy forms could disrupt Devourer technology. Even the most peaceful species found ways they could contribute to a galaxy-wide defense network, but not everyone agreed. Elder representatives from several species raised concerns about the moral implications of learning warfare. Violence breeds. More violence, argued an ancient Sylvan, whose roots were said to reach back 10,000 years. If we learn to fight, do we not become like the Devourers ourselves? Miller stepped forward to address the concern. There is a difference between predator and protector. The Devourers hunt to consume, we fight to defend. The difference is not in the weapons we use, but in why we use them. But how do we maintain that distinction? Asked an ethereal representative. How do we learn to kill without becoming killers? It was Colonel Pete Barnes who answered, his voice carrying the weight of years spent in service. By remembering what we are fighting for, every time we train, every time we prepare for battle, we remember that our strength exists to protect the weak, not to prey on them. The debate continued for hours, but gradually a consensus emerged. Galaxy would learn to defend itself, but it would do so according to principles that preserved what made each species unique. Humans would teach tactics and strategy, but each species would adapt those lessons to their own nature and abilities. 3 months later, first classes began at the Terran Defense Academy, established in a massive facility built into Kepler Station itself. Jake Miller found himself teaching basic military theory to beings who had never even considered the concept of organized violence. His first class included a Zephyrian, whose body could resonate at frequencies that could shatter Devourer armor. An ethereal who could phase through solid matter to attack enemy weak points. And a group of young gentle ones who had volunteered to learn combat medicine. The first rule of warfare, Miller told his students, is that you fight to end the fight. The goal is not to destroy your enemy, but to make them stop threatening what you protect. The Zephyrian student, who had chosen the name Crystallesia Vaude, raised a limb that sparkled with contained light. But what if they refuse to stop? What if, like the Devourers, they can only understand strength? Miller nodded. Then you show them strength. But you show them controlled strength, directed strength, strength that serves a purpose beyond itself. Across the galaxy, similar classes were taking place on worlds that had once been defenseless. The gentle ones were learning guerrilla tactics. Adapted to their natural agility and knowledge of their own terrain, the Sylvans were developing biological weapons that could disable rather than kill. The ethereals were mastering techniques of psychological warfare that could break enemy morale, without physical harm. But the most important lessons were not about weapons or tactics. They were about courage, determination, and the willingness to stand together when facing impossible odds. Dr. Amy Rodriguez established a research center dedicated to studying predator species and developing countermeasures for their tactics. Her work revealed that the galaxy was full of potential threats that had been held in check only by the presence of the Devourers. With their oppressors weakened, other aggressive species might emerge. We cannot simply wait for the next threat. To appear, she reported to the Defense Council, we must be prepared to face whatever comes, whether it is the Devourers returning with new tactics or entirely different enemies. The first test of the new Galactic Defense Network came when Devourer scouts were detected near the Outer Rim territories. But this time, instead of evacuation fleets fleeing in panic, the response was swift and coordinated. Mixed squadrons of human and alien ships intercepted the scouts before they could report back to their fleet. The engagement lasted only minutes, but its significance was immeasurable. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers had been denied intelligence about potential targets. They had been blocked, countered, and forced to retreat by the very species they had once harvested at will. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiance as the enemy scouts fled. Out. Surrounded by officers from a dozen different species. Beside him, Crystal Song of Morning monitored communications, while a Sylvan tactical officer coordinated pursuit vectors. They will be back, the Zephyrian commander noted. The Devourers will not accept this defeat easily. Let them come, Carter replied. This time, we will be ready. But the greatest change was not in the military preparations or the defensive networks. It was in the spirit of the beings who had once trembled in silence. Children on worlds throughout the galaxy were learning new stories, tales of courage. Rather than submission, of standing firm rather than running away. On Haven's Rest, a memorial was built where the first human had died fighting the Devourers. But it was not a monument to death or war. It was a sculpture that showed beings from many species standing together, facing outward toward the stars with determination rather than fear. The inscription, written in the languages of every member species, read simply, "They took one step forward." Captain Miller visited the memorial on the anniversary of the battle, accompanied by Soft Voice of Learning and many of the human and alien veterans who had fought together. As they stood before the monument, a group of young gentle ones approached. Wearing the uniforms of the Defense Academy, "Captain Miller," said their leader, a being whose name translated as Hope in Dark Places, "we wanted to thank you for teaching us that we did not have to be afraid." Miller looked at the young beings who had chosen to dedicate their lives to protecting others, and he felt something he had not expected. Pride, not in humanity's strength, but in what that strength had made possible. "You do not need to thank us," he said. "You learned to stand up on your own. We just showed you that it was possible."